the storyline between you, Jake the Snake, and Macho.
So I guess we'll start with the reason why I turned. I was already turning. The fans were already turning me.
It was a natural.
Yeah, it was a natural turn. They were. I mean, you could go back to Survivor Series in '91, and you could hear, even in the match with Hogan, you can hear the cheers, and so it was naturally happening on its own. So they needed a way to get me away from Jake, who Jake, I mean, him and Randy were, they were all tied up in an angle. So, so Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth were going to get married in Madison Square Garden. And, Jake, being the sinister, evil cat that he was just going to smash them as they came back through the curtain, with the chair, ruin their day and ruin all that. And so Jake's standing there in the curtain, and I'm behind Jake. And as Miss Elizabeth gets ready to walk through the curtain, he starts to swing. I grab the chair. I save the day, and your Babyface is born.
It's sealed.
Right, yeah. And then naturally I peel off with the Jake at that point, and and we end up going to WrestleMania. Well, it was 92, WrestleMania 92, with Jake. That was in Indianapolis. But, so yeah, it was a transition from, Jake and Randy working, turning me, just giving me the anointment of being a babyface character. And, but it was, the reason, I mean, obviously, the reason was behind it was just because I was turning naturally.
Were you excited to work with Jake?
Oh yeah, man. So I was already traveling with Jake, and the amount of knowledge of the business and why he did things and how he did things, I learned so much just traveling with him. Not to mention, all the bad stuff that I learned.
You learned a lot of other things.
I learned a lot of bad habits from Jake. But man, the knowledge that he spit traveling, us up and down the road.
Yeah.
Wow, man, he was honestly a wrestling genius. In the everything that he did, he was the one that taught me to carry a little pocket recorder with me. He says, because you're going to hear things like in songs that are going to click with you,
and you got
to write it. You got to put it in there because you won't remember it.
Yeah.
Especially traveling with him, I wouldn't remember it because there's a good chance I wasn't going to remember where I was at the night before. But or sometimes you'd be thinking about a promo and you would hit a line or something you would come up with. So he always had that little recorder with him that he would, he would put his thoughts on. So I got that from him. He was the one that taught me. He goes, your match starts as soon as you walk through that curtain. Doesn't start at ding, ding, ding. The match starts as soon as you come out of gorilla position. It's just,
and you figured that out probably better than anybody.
Oh yeah.
Your entrance was,
by the time I got to the ring, my match was half over.
Yeah.
Right. And for years, that was the truth.
And Jake was the same way. You and Jake had so many similarities in that because he was that first, I would say he was the first, like, for me anyway, in my generation, that first really scary, like he was the mysterious, scary person.
Yeah. Kevin, I think, like Kevin Sullivan tried it a little bit.
Yeah.
He flirted with, but he wasn't physically scary. He was a smaller stature guy. But he was kind of that sinister type character too. But Jake just had, his body type, his hair, everything.
He didn't have to do anything over the top because I feel like Kevin Sullivan a lot of times, he didn't do the eye makeup and stuff. Like Jake didn't have to do that.
It came really organic to
Jake could just smile and it felt evil.
Yeah. And it was. He was awesome. No, honestly,
And he wasn't physically imposing either.
he was tall. Jake was like 6'5", 6'6".
But he didn't have that build that you saw in the 80s and early 90s.
It would have took away from him, I think, if he had been really jacked. I think.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the body can be a distraction. I think he was built perfectly for what he was. And that was, just a sinister guy that could work with anybody. And everything he did, man, everything he did had a purpose, and it meant something for something later on, either in the match or the program, the whole deal. And he was just a wrestling genius.
Why do you think that, this could turn into a Jake the Snake episode here. Why do you think that when people talk about the Mount Rushmores of wrestlers or the greats, the top fives, even top tens,
right?
Why isn't Jake ever put into these categories? Why am I never mentioning him?
Well, and this is funny because somebody had asked me this in one of my One Dead Man shows about my Mount Rushmore, which I've stated many times is Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Stone Cold. That's my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
Those four guys are not the greatest wrestlers.
No.
That ever come down the pike. Those guys aren't necessarily the best psychologists. Those four guys are on my Mount Rushmore because of their contributions to the business.
Yeah.
What they meant to the business. Andre was traveling around. Andre was doing the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson long before any other wrestler was.
Yeah.
Andre was the face of wrestling. He was an attraction all over the world. He made wrestling cool to a lot of people who would never be exposed to wrestling.
Maybe the first global
by far.
wrestler.
By far. Yeah. Andre was friends with everybody. Andre was friends with Ali. He was friends with Schwarzenegger. He was friends. He had all these people because he was just bigger than life. Hogan, of course, the Hogan in the late 80s turned wrestling. He was the one there, and Vince's vision to take it on a national stage,
and pretty much made WCW what it was. When he turned heel,
obviously, Ric Flair, he was. He's the champ. He is what wrestling.
When you think of world champion, you think of
Ric Flair, and then Stone Cold. He was part of the biggest, probably the most. Most popular era ever in wrestling. We don't know what this era, where it's going to top out at. It's growing, but exponentially, but it's not growing like it did when Steve took over.
Yeah,
right.
Stone Cold's on another level.
Right, a whole nother level.
Yeah.
So that's how I come up with my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
Because people always ask me, you love Shawn Michaels, working with Shawn Michaels. Well, you never saw me say, oh, Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels was great. There's nobody in the ring better than Shawn Michaels. But Shawn Michaels didn't have as big a influence on the industry as a whole.
And an impact.
Yeah. Same with Bret Hart. Bret Hart in the ring. Nobody better than Bret Hart in the ring. But it's just what your impact on the industry. That's how I come up with mine, and that's why. And I think that's the same with Jake. If you narrowed my Mount Rushmore down, like give me the Mount Rushmore of heels or something like that.
Yeah,
then you're going to put a Jake the Snake in there, or just certain. You just need to be a little more specific. But if you go to Mount Rushmore, that's that's the way I think about it.
Yeah,
it's not skill or what you can do in the ring. It's what your influence over the whole industry was. So, but my goodness, Jake could work with anybody. Everything Jake did made sense, and you sure didn't want that python getting dropped on you at the end of the night. It's just so cool. He was cool.
He was, and I was always a heel guy. I loved heels, even as a kid. I enjoyed. I was a Four Horsemen fan. there wasn't very many kids in my school growing up that were they were pro Four Horsemen. Their dads were. They were all
Dusty.
Yeah,
Dusty
they loved Dusty, or they loved Hogan. They loved
Right.
Warrior.
Right.
And I loved the Four Horsemen. I loved Jake the Snake. I loved the heels. And when, the snake bite on Saturday morning, on Macho, and what that did for the sport itself was unreal.
Yeah, that caught national news.
Yeah.
When we didn't get national news.